Hello and welcome to the program. I am Suren. Hope and fantasy. These are two different words and also most definitely interconnected, but both having different interpretations. How can they be considered as a belief, as some do, that things will get better? The fantasy means imagining the impossible or improbable things. Fantasy can, of course, fuel the ability to cope with all the dreams and can drive creativity and ambition. In fact, some people find fantasy to be like that, as if in a sanctuary. It is a way to believe that even in difficult times, hope is still alive. And here are some examples of fantasy. The sudden appearance of hope. For example, A World of Fantasy, award-winning book that explores the social pressures, loneliness, and probably even medical research. Who is unfamiliar with Harry Potter, which is a story about a young adult who is given a chance to change a deteriorating world? Some people, like Jehovah's Witnesses, don't like them. Percy Jackson includes a story about a young adult saving his mother. The Fellowship of the Ring, a story about a group of people who redeems the Middle Earth. Two different words with distinctly different definitions. The tendency is for hope and fantasy to be confused for each other, which is said to be remarkable indeed, says Zoe Cruz. They are connected, but mistaking one for the other would consequently have unwanted outcomes. It is further explained that we cannot live without hope as humans, given the uncertain and turbulent times in which we now live. That would be of no value if there is not any reassurance that there are worse ways to live than believing that things will ultimately get better. What does, however, it point to that of imagining of the impossible, although it has its own place. As the Russian anarchist Mikhail Bakunin observed, without fantasy, to feel your hopes and dreams, it is entirely possible that we would still be drawing on the walls of caves. You may laugh at it. However, fantasy is an essential part of the human thinking, as it drives ambition of creativity, empowers and impels our desires to reach beyond the expected, while molding our future. Think of space exploration, for instance. Without fantasy, the world would be left void of the many great works of art, literature, and inventions. If we never fantasized about life with someone or something we are attracted to, how do our partners and ourselves do our jobs and build our houses? Question mark. Would it be at all possible? For example, how would we be ever motivated to choose our dreams and hopes that we might succeed in that persistence? There would be, however, huge problems when fantasy, rather than reality, becomes our day-to-day existence. Agreed? As Circa Surviving is so insightfully the same, the difference between medicine and the poison is the actual dose when it comes to it. However, it is also true that one can become seduced by fantasy, and the popular culture is, yes, littered with disturbing examples of it. And such stories are like the recent BBC miniseries, I'm not sure if you're familiar with, The Apple Tree Yard, which has presented people living like that, with catastrophic consequences. And fantasies might lead us into delusion, which is more extreme. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho revolved around Norman Bates, who not only kept his mother's skeleton in his attic, but also assumed her persona physically and emotionally. And then, in terms of portraying how fantasy can often hide behind a chilling but normal facade, and in redefining the notion of an ordinary person, becomes fatally delusional. There is the ultimate, so to say, bunny boiler, Alex Forrest, the character played by Glenn Close in the film Fatal Attraction. These fictitious examples are certainly very extreme. Having lived more in fantasy land than in reality, it becomes a kind of nature, inhibiting the condition because it is finitely defiant, making the leaving it virtually very painful. But as Susan Jeffers, the author of Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, shows, every time you step out of your comfort zone, your life becomes bigger. Anais Nin says life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage. Becoming entrenched in fantasy is more likely to apply to people who find reality unbearable. That is true. They are those who had traumatic childhood and very painful life experiences and negative self-belief, which are all precursors to such fantasy addiction and blocks to doing the work to clear the harder or even making a change very necessary. However, there is a good news we need to share, and that you can heal yourself and recover from these conditions. According to this literature that I have been looking at, when we are constantly involved in fantasy and keep going with it, is not what we are really doing, as it is in truth. Really avoiding the self. This is when we tend to choose social media, mindless TV, binge eating, video games, pornography, obsessive shopping, drugs, and alcohol, rather than spending time with ourselves and learning what we really want out of life. Continuous distraction or escapism, in different words, is an exercise in self-administered anesthesia and is the exact opposite of mindfulness. Now, where fantasy happens to be is often more present than romantic relationships. Sometimes that's the case. In fact, it doesn't help that the media drip feeds us a diet of romantic fantasy nonsense. I'm not talking about romanticism. They start in intensity and extreme chemistry, and perhaps just like the bad perfume or soap advertisements on television. But again, your roots of these conditions are often based in childhood days. You see, we tend to use terminologies full of gaps, supposedly to correct perceived mistakes and to perpetuate consciously advantageous yet subconsciously or unconsciously comfortable familiarity. Might be good and might even recreate an important figure from our youth. If you have been burnt by fantasy relationships once or twice, it is really important to flex yourself. It is therefore also vital to conduct everything from your own place of wisdom. All your friendships, all your business, all other situations, and all your romantic relationships. Perhaps showing down, or rather I should say slowing down a bit, is essential to be able to access this situation. This can also be observed in one's own self. Very much in the most cases, a helpful sequence of 4 words in human language. What could have been? Remember? Living in reality means truly a commitment to how things are now, not as in the past, when someone else had to do some changes to their behavior. This is where hope becomes essential, because hope allows you, me, all of us to exercise choice. Hope allows you and me to make good life decisions. But if it cannot be observed, how can it be said that it is welcome? For it can be kept stuck in a dark corner and an isolated place, and not in the open. When the situation looks hopeless, with everything that has been, it is not hope lost at all, but it is a perspective to study, to look at. Hope lives in the present moment. So, the advice given is this: don't waste another second in the fantasy land, if that is the case. For life is real, nevertheless. Stephanie A. Kane, I don't know if you're familiar with, writes, I believe that the main function of speculative fiction is to imagine a better world that could exist, whether it be through magic or through science. She further writes, if I am stuck in a world where every character is deeply flawed, where there are no gods and precious few heroes, what kind of vacation destination is that? If I have to struggle to find a character I am rooting for, or if every character I care about dies a horrible death, GRRM, I'm looking at you, she writes, how is that relaxing or pleasant? Just imagine. I'm not saying I need everything to be sunshine and daisies. I'm a sucker for doomed love, self-sacrifice, and character torture in general. I love a book that can make me cry, and I love even more a book that can make me flat out sob. But at the end, I want to wipe my eyes and know that the characters who made through are going to be okay. Maybe they have been through hell. But at least one of the characters I love to be standing tall and unbroken at the end. Remember what J.R.R. Tolkien wrote? There, peeking among the cloud wreck above a dark for high up in the mountains, Sam saw a white star twinkle for a while. The beauty of it smote his heart as he looked up out of the forsaken land, and hope returned to him. For like a shaft, clear and cold, the thought pierced him that in the end, the shadow was only a small and passing thing. There was light and high beauty forever beyond its reach. As it was said, realism does not have to be mean, grimdark, or gritty. We shall meet you again by the next episode. Until then, keep smiling and be happy. Thank you.